I think in a market right now that is pretty topsy-turvy, arguably, I think when we talk about the market being topsy-turvy, we do kind of tend to, in the back of my mind, think more about the US. But if you actually look at the FTSE and the wider British market over here, it's actually a really quite a robust place, I think, to invest. Granted, there's a lot of financials and a lot of commodities that are sort of based on the London Stock Exchange, but there's a lot of companies that provide software as a service and remote working capability style software and services and products and things like that. And so yeah, I think it's certainly, I think in this, as I say, this kind of period where inflation is clearly not slowing down. There is a crunch on people's discretionary expenditure. The cost of living is skyrocketing, but fundamentally, people still need to work, and they still need to be able to work efficiently and effectively. Because if you don't, you get sacked, or you don't get pay increases and things like that. You don't progress. So I think it's interesting. It's one of those areas that when people think about work from home, what was really big in the pandemic, the likes of Zoom and those work from home darling stocks that have tanked basically since late last year. That's not really, I think, the way to play this. I think the way to play this kind of shift to work from home is...
Welcome to the Exponential Investor podcast. Want to be a better, smarter, more clued up investor? Well, you've come to the right place. We cover the breakthrough investment ideas you don't hear about in the mainstream to keep you on top of the megatrends and opportunities reshaping our world.
And welcome back to Exponential Investor podcast today. Joining me is my co-editor, Sam Volkering. Sam, how are you, mate?
Good morning, Shay. I'm very well, thank you. Having a decent week, even though the markets continue to be volatile and topsy-turvy and full of fear and pessimism. But I'm loving it. How are you going?
Look, do you know what? Absolutely awesome. I haven't looked at the market today because I've decided I didn't want any bad news. So I just, rather than look at stocks, how my personal portfolio is going, I've actually had my head buried in some research, a commodity report that I'm writing for Southbank at the moment. And that leads me to my first question. Now, Sam, we were part of a roundtable on Monday night with some other amazing people here at Southbank Research. But you made a couple of interesting comments. So today I am taking the lead because basically I want to learn a thing or two about what you brought up. Now, some of the things that you talked about were quantum computing, and I'm very keen to get to that. First of all, I want to talk about your computer screen. Now, you told me off air that you currently have a 38-inch monitor, I think it is, with a 21 to 10 ratio. Please tell me, what the heck is a 21 to 10 ratio, and is this the future of computing, home computing?
Wow. All right. So for anybody that loves a little bit of a geek out, us fellow geeks out there that love a bit of tech wizardry, which my house is full of, I decided to, I don't know if it's an upgrade because I was using a 55-inch LED on the wall, but I'm moving office. We've recently done a renovation at our house, and I'm moving office shortly, and so the giant telly on the wall isn't feasible anymore. So I got a monitor, and I decided to get an Alienware. So Alienware is owned by Dell. Alienware is their gaming branch. So it's a Alienware 38-inch ultra wide screen monitor. So the ratio is the aspect ratio, which is a 21 by 10 aspect ratio. So you'll find that if you're at the cinema, typically you'll have, I think is it a 16 by 9? I can't remember if it's 16 or 21 by 9, but this is just going that little bit further to that cinema screen width. But it's for productivity purposes, it's fantastic because I've got you on my screen, I've got my emails, I've got a chat box, I've got Word documents. I can manage a whole bunch of things at once. And to be fair, so this actually does bring up an interesting topic. So I remember when the pandemic first hit, and basically everybody was stuck at home, and then everybody had to work from home. And I thought to myself, an interesting play on that would be something like the companies that provide a lot of the kind of tech and hardware that you need for that. So companies that make monitors, companies that make keyboards, microphones, mouse. Like I upgraded my mouse. This is the weirdest mouse you might ever see, but this is a Logitech mouse, and a typical mouse would be flat like that, and this one actually is on the side. So you kind of hold it. You hold it on the side like this. Very
Pilot.
ergo friendly.
It's like a
But
pilot.
so yeah, exactly right. So there's all these sorts of companies, and there's some great companies out there that do a lot of stuff like that. Logitech do a lot of the accessories and peripherals for computing. Dell is obviously really big around computers and monitors and accessories and peripherals. Corsair is one that people probably don't know a lot about either, but they make heaps of stuff for gaming, for gamers, again for computing productivity. So there's a lot of companies in this space that people talk about semiconductors and silicon chips, and that you're very well aware of the commodities that are needed for all those things. But when you think about monitors, keyboards, mouses, whatever you want to describe the plural of those as, even my.
I think you just turned yourself off.
Accidentally muted myself there. It's got a whole bunch of components and stuff. These are all things that all of a sudden are a lot more relevant. People upgrade quite, more frequently than you probably realize. So, I think it's actually an interesting play in the market around. Even they're also kind of recession proof as well, because if people are now using them for productivity and working from home more and more, it's not things that people tend to skimp on. That are doing it. So yeah. Anyway, that was my sort of long explanation of my new massive Alienware monitor. It's got 4 different sections for LEDs on the back of it, so it looks really cool as well. Yeah, maybe I'll post a couple of pictures on my Twitter feed about it.
Look, I think you absolutely should. And look, we all know men love to brag about the size of their monitor. So I thought I'd just give you that opportunity. But you've touched on a great point, and it is going to slightly derail me from the point I was getting to, aside from the fact that
Derailing's great on this podcast. That's what I love about it.
There's no rules here. But you made an excellent point about how you've gone to a bigger screen size because you believe it enhances productivity. Now, I run multiple screens at home. I've got 24 inches in front of me, and I've got 27 inches to my right. And I'll pop this up on Twitter, and maybe we can compare sizes. But I've got it in
your combined size is bigger than mine.
I've got it on the vertical because I feel it enhances my productivity having one dedicated Word document and that. But you've raised an interesting point here is about how the pandemic has shifted how we work and the tools we use to do our work. Now, back right when the pandemic happened in March, April, I made a pretty bullish call on JB Hi-Fi in Australia, which is a major electronics supplier here. They're basically, they used to be a discretionary retailer, and the argument that I made is that they've gone from being a discretionary retailer to essentially a consumer staple, because they're shaping, they provide everything to work from home. Now, given this work from home trend isn't going away soon, I guess you could argue that there's going to be more and more investment made in personal computing and basically running mini businesses from home.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I just talking about that, it reminded me of a really interesting chart I saw on Twitter this week as well, where post-pandemic, which is fair to say we're kind of post-pandemic here in the UK, that's for sure. There's 22% less public transport travel here in the UK than there was pre-pandemic. So that's a massive decrease in the amount of commuting done here in the UK, which indicates that, and if you look at, and the unemployment numbers aren't wild, so it indicates that a lot of people are working from home, which again suggests that these sorts of things about working from home and how we do it is not something that's really going to disappear. I don't think it's going to become the norm, but it's certainly going to be a lot more prevalent than it ever was before. And so, yeah, it does. All the things around personal computing, home offices. If you think about it, you could even argue that some of the companies that sell things like furniture for home offices, right, could potentially benefit from this sort of thing. So, I think in a market right now that is pretty topsy-turvy, arguably, I think when we talk about the market being topsy-turvy, we do kind of tend to, in the back of my mind, think more about the US. But if you actually look at the FTSE and the wider British market, over here. It's actually a really quite a robust place, I think, to invest. Granted, there's a lot of financials and a lot of commodities that are sort of based on the London Stock Exchange, but there's a lot of companies that provide software as a service and remote working capability style software and services and products and things like that. And so yeah, I think it's certainly, I think in this, as I say, this kind of period where inflation is clearly not slowing down, there is a crunch on people's discretionary expenditure. The cost of living is skyrocketing, but fundamentally, people still need to work, and they still need to be able to work efficiently and effectively. Because if you don't, you get sacked, or you don't get pay increases and things like that. You don't progress. So I think it's interesting. It's one of those areas that when people think about work from home, what was really big in the pandemic, the likes of Zoom and those work from home darling stocks that have tanked basically since late last year. That's not really, I think, the way to play this. I think the way to play this kind of shift to work from home is the physical hardware and devices and everything that goes into those that make that happen. I think that's the probably smarter play in this kind of market.
Um, okay, you have very so gently led me to my next point. Thank you for that. So we're talking about the here and now and what the play is for now, but there was something that you brought up on Monday night that I really do, partly for my own knowledge, because I don't know a lot about it either, but I do think other people would benefit from knowing that, and that is quantum computing. Now, this is quite futuristic, and it's very much, I'll let you elaborate on it a bit more, but it's very much that next leap in technology. And a classic example of technology moving forward is I actually don't use a notepad. I use a digital notebook for everything that I do. And when I first started using that, people made comments of like, it was very unusual to do that. But this next leap that you're talking about, this quantum computing, this is completely revolutionary for computing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it's very complex, and it involves, it's not your typical kind of what we all kind of know and understand computing to be. It does sort of take it to another realm, and a lot of it is still quite theoretical. But you've got major organizations like Google, I know Facebook as well has been working on it. Obviously, IBM has been heavily invested in quantum computing and developing increasing amounts of qubits in their quantum computing systems. There's some great companies in Australia, in the US, that are looking to develop different approaches to quantum computing processing. Ultimately, it's at the moment, quantum computing isn't really, something that you will necessarily have, a quantum computer sat on your desk in the next, 2 to 3 to 5 years. And the real purpose and benefit that they have is that their ability to compute certain outputs would be particularly relevant for industry like drug development, climate technologies, even efficiencies in things like battery technology, because you can run exponentially more calculations and simulations for a whole bunch of different things. So healthcare and medicine is really one area in particular where they think it's going to make a really big indent. Of course, there's a lot of skeptics that think that it's not feasible, it's not going to happen, that there's plenty of arguments about some of the companies out there that there are some short sellers that are calling some companies hoaxes and scammers, which is fascinating because it's exactly the kind of thing that you expect to see from really early stage developmental technologies that hold a significant potential to unlock a great value proposition and a great amount of wealth if they are successful in the future. And we sort of look in history and we go, the early days of computing, and there were these big giant, there online you can find images of the giant 1-ton IBM machines, the early computers that were run on tape and things like that, being shuffled into an office. It's somewhat comparable, is that the early stages of these technologies, it is clunky, it's not necessarily convenient for home use, but then over a period of time, and usually it is a couple of decades when it comes to computing, is that things get better. They learn more by trial and error and experimenting. Things get better, smaller, more efficient, and then ultimately you do end up with maybe you do end up with a quantum computer on your desk running your big ass monitor. I don't know, but I think it's one of those things where if you've got an eye on future and you like the ideas around some of the big trends in investing and tech, I can't see how you can ignore quantum computing, because it does hold a really, if they are successful in developing effective, functional, affordable quantum computers, the potential that could unlock is astronomical.
Arguably, you could say it's comparable to the internal combustion engine and how that applied to personal vehicles. Because we had computers that move. Computers. You can tell what I'm actually thinking about for a change. We had steam engines that moved us from A to B, and then we had the internal combustion engine that helped get other forms of transport happening. But what that internal combustion engine actually did was allow personal transportation, and completely changed how and where we live, because we didn't all need to be so centrally located anymore. It sounds like quantum computing has the ability to do that, but on the level of, on the ability to process information, it changes how we analyze and how we process information when it arrives, or if.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make probably a fair comparison to what quantum computing theoretically can do compared to current modern computing, it would be somewhat akin to, like, in a transportation analogy, it would be somewhat akin to walking to the internal combustion engine.
Okay, right. That's a bigger leap.
Probably not even that. Probably like walking to, the most advanced supercar engine, or maybe a Formula One engine, right? It's a hybrid of internal combustion engine with electric and energy recovery and a whole bunch of fancy stuff going on. That's probably the better.
All right, well, that just goes to show how little I know about quantum computing, because I didn't understand it was such a leap forward. All right, well, we are nearly out of time today, but I would like to close on one question. Now, as I said, a couple of things that you touched on Monday night, we're all talking about, the leaps forward coming in technology. Given quantum computing is still a fair way off, what do you see, what's on your radar right now of one of the next big leaps coming, that's coming forward sooner rather than later?
I think one of the key things to clarify there is that quantum computing isn't a way off. It is actually here, and so it is happening now. A quantum, like a personal quantum computer or something like that, that's probably a bit of a way off. But in terms of utilizing quantum computing technology, companies are doing that now, and there are investable opportunities in that space right now that are developing the next generation of quantum computers, and a lot of them are starting to come to market. So we're really starting to see that area of investment actually become accessible for people now. So that's happening right now. It's not just something that's going to come in the future as well. Outside of that, I mean, it's hard. It's still hard for me to ignore the potential of what we are seeing around the development of effectively a new financial system built around cryptocurrency networks. I think it's important that you can probably, there is just a smoke alarm going off in my house. Several of them now. With a bit of luck, my house won't burn down while they're going off. Nonetheless, it's not my monitor hasn't caught fire.
And you know
so
what?
that's the
I'm
important
sure you
thing
can
in this
carry it out with
situation.
2 arms anyway.
Exactly, it'd be the first. I'm sure my wife would be impressed if I carried the computer out instead of her. Right. So look, outside of that, yeah, I was going to say you don't sort of necessarily. Some people sort of bundle this stuff into fintech, and there are some really interesting financial technology companies and stocks out there at the moment. But I think it's sort of beyond fintech, and we're really looking to how that ecosystem can deliver finance that's accessible, efficient, and delivers a lot more control and power back to the individual. So there's, I think, still a lot of great, and a lot of those companies have been smashed. Like a lot of the listed companies, if you look, on the boards, Square, Coinbase, MicroStrategy, Marathon, Riot Mining, there's loads of different Argo blockchain. There's loads of different companies that have just been hammered from pillar to post. A, because of the fall off in growth and tech stocks, and B, because that they're all inherently linked to cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of opportunities in that sector, I think, as well, and that's something I'm continuing to focus on very, very closely.
All right, Sam, we are probably going to need to leave our chat there today, and I think you might need to go see if you've still got a kitchen left. So everybody, if you do want to hear more from Sam's ideas on the tech space and the crypto space, our amazing people who know more about the internet than I do will put a link somewhere around this video so you can click and learn more about what Sam's been talking about. Also, too, as you can tell, these podcasts are authentic and recorded in one cut. We do one take, I should say. We don't rehearse these. Everybody, I want to say thank you for watching. Sam, thanks for being here and helping clarify what the heck quantum computing even is for me. That's all for today. Bye for now.